ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This week we return to our Every Best Picture series with Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You.
Hey, but you know the drill. Before we begin, it would be a great favor to us if you went ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're over 900 subscribers, trying to get to 1,000. Hey, and while you're there, go ahead and just tap that little bell next to it. That way you'll know every single time we upload a new review or video. James? Oh, wait, I forgot. Deep Dive Movie Reviews does contain spoilers, so you've been warned. James,
That's
let's
right.
talk. You Can't Take It With You.
Okay, yes. So this is 1938 movie from Frank Capra, winner of Best Picture at the 11th Academy Awards. Essentially, this is the story of a young man called Tony Kirby, played by James Stewart in one of his first kind of real leading man roles. He is the son of a prominent Wall Street banker. And he is in love with a young woman called Alice Sycamore, played by Jean Arthur. Little do they know? They know. But Kirby's father is unaware that Alice's family are an eccentric bunch, and her father in particular is the last holdout of a big sort of land buyout, big land takeover that Kirby is trying to finalize, trying to close the deal on. Now, the story essentially revolves around Tony and Alice trying to get the approval of their parents in order so they can get married, knowing full well that when they meet and when they're introduced, they are not going to hit it off well at all. They are two very, very different families. Now, for me, I mean, this was billed as a kind of sort of screwball romantic comedy. I hadn't seen it before. But it's Frank Capra, so I was like, okay, it's got a good pedigree. He won his third Best Director Oscar in 5 years, I think it was, or something ridiculous. His third one in the 30s after it happened one night when Mr. Deeds goes to town. And it seemed to be pitched to me like this was about the romantic comedy. This was about the young lovers, really, and about the hurdle. This kind of sort of meet the parents kind of setup, if you like. But really, this is about the dads. This is about Lionel Barrymore and what's the other guy called? Edward Arnold. Is it Edward Arnold? And for me, this is like a clash between these two very sort of different, one very proud, one very carefree, one very eccentric, one very stuffy. What most importantly, as the title might suggest, one very money driven and the other one who has learnt to let go of all of that capitalist focus and to treasure what time he has left on Earth. So, Steve, where are you at with this movie? I mean, did you know it? Had you seen it before? What did you think of it?
James, like you, I've never seen it. Surprisingly, being a Frank Capra movie, having Lionel Barrymore, having James Stewart, I have to ask myself why. Obviously, I've seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington a number of times. Obviously, the quintessential Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, a wonderful Frank Capra movie I've seen more times than you can imagine. So why have I not seen this film? Especially the first 20 minutes as we're introduced to this very bohemian family, which I really appreciated. Even in 1938, this trope of, this capitalism, money driven versus almost a theme that we would resonate with today is how do we have a better quality of life? Or what sacrifices are we willing to make financially in order to focus on relationships and the people who are around us, which is what Lionel Barrymore's character has been able to do. Sadly, though, I feel that this movie was hit or miss. And by the end of it, I realized why I hadn't seen it, that it doesn't seem to be a film that has been on people's radar as much as some other Frank Capra movies. And I watched this with my wife. My wife loves black and white films, classic films from this period, more than I do. So when she heard that I was going to sit down and watch this, let's watch it, she found herself getting frustrated with it. And so there's an element with this film that, and I'm sure we'll get into it in a moment, which I found there's elements I certainly appreciated and liked, but I would say are done much better in future tropes that tread this same theme
Mm.
of the Hatfields and the McCoys, the two different families from completely different worldviews having to come together because of a marriage. I'm thinking, Look Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier, or what's even who does this wonderful is the American rendition of La Cage aux Folles, The Birdcage,
Oh
with
yeah, for
Nathan
sure.
Lane and Robin Williams, where you have this very bohemian, in this case, gay couple with all the flamboyance, with the conservative, money-loving, power-hungry Gene Hackman senator. Yeah, I just found at times this movie, I found it frustrating. I found it not making a lot of sense. I found just weird things happening for no apparent reason whatsoever, and trying to have some kind of rhyme or reason to it. In the end, it kind of works, but largely, I felt, here I am, I feel like I'm scoring it already. It left me, it's not something I'm going to be racing back to watch again.
No, I think you kind of hit on the head the kind of the problem with it, if you like. It's like this is a trope that we have seen many, many, many times. I mean, this is probably one of the first times where it was done. Certainly in a movie. I mean, it was based on a Pulitzer Prize winning play, and you can see the theatrical conceit of it, particularly in the Sycamore household. Where you got explosions from downstairs, you
Yes.
got granddaughters and whomever's dancing in and out. Her husband just comes in with his glockenspiel every now and again, just keeps
Yeah.
sort of playing it. The
I,
servants
I said
running
to
in
my
and out.
wife, I said, even before I read in Wikipedia that it was based on a stage play, I said, this really should have been done on the stage. This is where this story would come alive much more. This doesn't translate into film as well as it would have worked on stage.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Seeing all of this going on at once, simultaneously, right in front of you live, I can imagine how that was incredibly entertaining and intoxicating, and all the rest of it. I mean, for me, certainly towards the end, its big sort of denouement, which unsurprisingly is Anthony Kirby coming round to the idea that maybe money isn't everything. It just feels like a dry run for It's a Wonderful Life. The final movement of this movie, you're like, this is exactly the same kind of realization and development and what have you. So you're just kind of like, okay, you're doing it here, but you will do it better. It's like watching Michael Crichton direct Westworld, knowing that he's just about to write Jurassic Park. You're like, just work these ideas out until you've got them the way you want them. And beyond that, I felt it was kind of very run of the mill. I mean, there's this great early scene up in Kirby's, the upper offices of the bank. And you feel watching that, you're like, oh, well, this feels very much like the Coen brothers were watching this when they were writing Hudsucker Proxy. These boardrooms and these sort of worker drones. The guy who is encouraged by Vanderoff to quit his job then and there. He's like checking numbers. He's just checking that these numbers add up with these numbers. He's one of the accountant drones. And he's just encouraged, like, give it up. What you want to do is build toys and, be creative. But the daily grind has got the better of you and has trapped you now. So I wanted a lot more scenes in the bank. With those characters there. I felt that if the story had played out there rather than at the Sycamore House, I would have probably enjoyed it a lot more, because the Sycamore House is kind of, yes, it's about this little bohemian safe haven that they have carved out for themselves in Manhattan in the 1930s, which is under threat. And as the film goes on, you see it eventually sort of all stripped away until there's like nothing there. And it's only in the final seconds of the movie that they re-inject it with energy and life and all the rest of it. And so you see that that's the kind of the tragic space within the movie. But I would have far preferred if more of it had played out over on the Kirby side at the bank, because that felt like a far more sort of vigorous and infused situation, even though because it's chaotic in its own way.
Yeah, and For me, one of the disappointing elements of the Sycamore House is how many of the characters, like Lionel Barrymore's wife, just seems to be not so much good natured as just unaware.
Yeah.
She's flaky, you know. Whereas rather than someone who's really grounded, who's made decisions in her life, like I'm not going to live this way. I'm going to live a life that brings enrichment to me and to those that I love around me. It's more like she's just a flake and she's fell in with what her husband's doing, and she just says weird things occasionally. So a lot of the well-intentioned themes that this movie is striving to convey are lost in a sense of flakiness for me.
There's almost like a selfishness to how carefree everybody in that house is. It's like you can't run a household like this.
Right.
You're all
Yeah.
so self-involved,
Yeah.
you know, and yes, you're self-involved in your own, you know, freedom and pleasures and gratifications and all the rest of it. But you know, you've created an absolute sort of car crash of a domestic environment here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at least, you know, you need a degree of regimentation and routine and all the rest of it. Just, you know, there needs to be order. There needs to be order
Yeah.
within chaos for it to function. And this
I
was and there wasn't, and it was kind of infuriating.
You know, like we said earlier, on the stage, having that girl do the ballerina thing and the explosions would have been funny. But all I kept thinking of, if I was living in that house, would you stop twirling around? You're driving me nuts. And I thought some of the best elements, or the best dialogue, was between James Stewart and his father, when he said, you know, Father, you do this because you like it, but I don't like it. And I thought that was a wonderful piece of dialogue. This movie is not without its merits. There's some strong elements in it, but it's too hit or miss from beginning to end for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up James Stewart, because it wasn't his first leading role, but this was kind of the leading role that made him a star, apparently.
Mhm.
It was the first time he was working with Capra, and it really sort of introduced him as a leading man, and obviously led to numerous collaborations and a huge, very successful career. And I love James Stewart. However, I don't love him in this movie. I found him really lost in the mix. You know, it's not bad. His performance, there's nothing wrong with it. And like you say, that's one of the moments where he really does stand out. But in no way do I come away from this moment going, that Stewart kid, he's got a future. You know, he's the new leading man that we've all been looking for.
Yeah.
I felt that this was a film that's completely dominated by the two fathers.
Yeah.
You know, that's the real clash. That's the real struggle. I mean, there's never any doubt that Jimmy Stewart and Jean Arthur are going to get together at the end. Nor is it ever really in any sense of any state of peril or jeopardy throughout.
No.
So you're just kind of like, it's all about just getting these two old men, to sit down and have a conversation, which is, yes, I understand the conceit of many of these sort of comedies and manners, or whatever you want to call them. But the idea that Jimmy Stewart came out of this like the big winner is baffling to me.
I couldn't agree more, James. He's pretty much a wallflower for most of this film until the dialogue that I mentioned. And if I think about it now, I've never thought of James Stewart being in this film as being a high point of his career, which obviously it was at this point. But when I think of Jimmy Stewart, I think of It's a Wonderful Life. I think of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Like there's some truly great movies that Jimmy Stewart did, and this is not one that is high on my list.
No, I mean, Vertigo, Rear Window, you know, all his Hitchcock movies.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, well, this is the thing. He's done so many great movies. Philadelphia Story. You know, you keep going. There's so many, but this is nowhere near the top.
No.
Nowhere near at all. I don't know anybody that raves about this movie, and certainly not for Jimmy Stewart.
Well, James, before we give our final decision on whether it stands the test of time, although I think anybody watching up to this point might be clued in to which way we're tending on this, why don't you tell us a little bit about how it did at the 11th Academy Awards?
Okay, yeah. I mean, it did pretty well. I think it got it won the big two. It won best director and best picture. It was nominated for a few others as well. Actually, best supporting actress for Spring Byington, who played Mrs. Sycamore. You know, the carefree mother who just likes to paint and take up a new hobby every other day, which is odd, because that's one of the stranger characters in it. I mean, it's kind of weird looking at it today and looking at what it was up against. It's kind of a surprise. I mean, it was up against The Adventures of Robin Hood,
Oh,
which is such a, which
yeah.
seems like that was the big spectacle movie of that
Yes.
year. That's the movie. I mean, that movie came away with like 3 or 4 wins that year, all in the major sort of technical categories. It won for its score, it won for its art direction, for its editing. You know, they always say whatever wins best editing should win best picture, kind of thing. It's always a good marker. So one feels like The Adventures of Robin Hood was kind of the favorite, and that You Can't Take It With You might almost have been a bit of an upset, particularly because Capra had won so many times recently already.
Right.
The fact that he won again, although ironically, Michael Curtiz directed Adventures of Robin Hood, didn't he? I think, and he didn't get nominated.
Well, just as a telltale of what we've said, I've never seen You Can't Take It With You. I've seen The Adventures of Robin Hood, Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, many times. That is a classic. So again, it just goes to show you, and I'm sure we're going to have this happen as we go through the years with the Academy Awards. The runners up tend to have greater legs than the eventual winner.
Very much so. I mean, it's as you know from recent years, you know, the Oscars ceremony builds to such a kind of dizzying head of steam in the weeks running up to it that very often, you know, the winner ends up being the wrong movie. You know, when all the dust has settled, when clearer heads prevail, you're like, well, of course that's not the best movie. That's the best movie, and that's the one that people will go back to, and that's something that I'm really interested in exploring as we go on here. There are some other notable things that happened that year. The first ever foreign language film was nominated for Best Picture. The French movie The Grand Illusion, which is a brilliant war movie.
Oh, I've not seen.
Brilliant First World War movie. Well worth checking out. Jezebel was nominated for, of course, Bette Davis won Best Actress for Jezebel. One of what I think 2, 3. How many times she won? 2 or 3 times, I think she won. Spencer Tracy won his 2nd consecutive Best Actor Oscar. For Boys Town. Jimmy Cagney was in there for Angels with Dirty Faces, which is one of my favorite Jimmy Cagney performances. I'm not sure that it's the best Jimmy Cagney movie, but it's a really fun one.
And I was going to say, I love Boys Town with Spencer Tracy. My dad and I would watch
I've
that
never
together.
Seen it.
Yeah, and you know, when we used to travel on long distance trips when I was a kid out west, and when you go through Nebraska, you'd go by on the interstate, you'd see Boys Town on, I think, the water tower or something, so you could see it from quite a ways from the highway. And my dad would say, you know that movie we saw, Boys Town? That's it right there. And I was like it really. Watching the movie and then realizing this is a real place that I drive by once a year. I have that childhood memory.
So Boys Town is a town?
No, it's a boys' home. Spencer Tracy plays a priest in that film. It's been quite a few years since I last saw it, but I have such fond memories of watching it with my dad. And it was a priest who basically would take kids from the street, and he started a home, and it's called Boys Town. I think now it's the more politically correct Boys and Girls Town or something like that. But it's definitely it's based on a true story of a guy who, you know, did good, and his legacy continues to this day.
That's fascinating, because that's very similar to the plot of Angels with Dirty Faces. Because that's all about like a boys' home, and the kids there all really idolize Jimmy Carrot's character, who is a gangster, and they're like, oh yeah, he's the cause. And I think it's Pat O'Brien plays the priest who runs the boys' home, who's also a friend of Jimmy Cagney's, and he's like, and goes to talk to him when he's on death row, and says, look, I want you to do me a favor. When you are being led to the electric chair, so I'm going to spoil the end of Angels. He's like, can you like break down and cry and beg for forgiveness? Because if you hold your head up high, and Jimmy Cagney, you know, is a tough guy, and that he's gonna hold his head up high, and he's gonna go to the chair, you know, with a smile on his face. He's like, if you do that, my kids will idolize you forever, and they'll all end up in the same situation you are. So can you show them that it's not the way to go? Can you break down, turn yellow? And and he's like, no way, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And then in the final scene, and you see him go kind of behind a curtain, and you only see it in silhouette, and then you just hear him break down and fall to his knees, like, "No, God, don't do it, don't do it." And you just see Pat O'Brien just kind of going, "See you, kids. He sucks. You're not going to do that." And so it's this great ending. I think Humphrey Bogart's in there as well somewhere.
I remember now. I haven't seen that quite as many times, but I remember watching that with my father as well. We were my dad was a big classic movies, and I remember in the 70s we would watch these on Saturday afternoon all the time.
Yeah, no, you're very lucky to have had that opportunity. Yeah. There's so many of these like old movies that I haven't had the chance to see yet. But yeah, that one is a good one. We did a lot of like film noir and old gangster, Warner Brothers gangster movies at college.
It's been so long, but I'd like to watch that one again. In fact, if anything, Tammy, she loves these movies so much, and they stopped Turner Classic Movies. We used to get Turner Classic on Now, and they don't have it anymore. So there's really not a platform that's accessible to us that I'm aware of, that we can just have regular classic films like this. And
see, this is why physical media is such a good thing. I have many of these movies, these old like Warner Archive especially are great for like bringing everything back out on Blu-ray.
Yeah,
so I've got a lot of those, particularly the old Humphrey Bogart ones. Anyway, we digress.
Yes.
So suffice to say that yes, You Can't Take It With You was up against some pretty stiff competition, and but did come away with Best Picture and with Best Director, even though there were some other movies that have stood the test of time. Pygmalion was the other big one.
Oh, right.
George Bernard Shaw.
Yep.
Adaptation with Leslie Howard, which is great, and obviously paved the way to My Fair Lady and all the rest of it.
Indeed.
So, Stephen,
James.
You Can't Take It With You. How do you feel? Does it stand up? Does it stand the test of time? Does it deserve to be remembered in the annals of history as one of the Oscar Best Picture winners?
I think it's safe to say that although this is hardly a bomb, this is not it doesn't stand the test of time as being the Academy Award winner that we would have picked, particularly from that list of films that you just described, because you could probably guess both from your reaction and mine when you would list some of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that one. And so when I hear You Can't Take It With You, it's like, oh yeah. And so, and it's unfortunate because I enjoy Lionel Barrymore. I even enjoyed the character, although I felt at times he vacillated a little better than his wife, but not to the degree I would have liked, as someone who was truly grounded and knew the decisions he made. It seemed like occasionally he was able to have that front, but then other times he seemed almost like a person with dementia. Like, I don't understand how the world operates. The IRS, you mean supposed to pay taxes? Well, yes, you can be bohemian, but yes, the water still has to come into your house. The lights still have to come on. You have to pay your taxes. So that kind of aloofness actually irritated me more than kind of inspired me. So that's a long way of saying no. It doesn't stand the test of time. And go watch Boys Town or Angels with what is it? Angels with
Dirty Faces.
Angels
or The Adventures of Robin Hood, which I think was probably the favorite on the night.
Yes.
And or Le Grand Illusion is great. Is a really, really good French.
I haven't seen that one, but
First World War movie.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page. I hadn't seen this before. I didn't really know what it was about until we came to do this, and I just think all of these things have been done better elsewhere. I didn't believe the chaotic nature of Barrymore's home life at all. Interesting little bit of trivia: the reason that the character is on crutches had to be written in to the script because Barrymore's arthritis had got so bad that he couldn't really walk around much. He has some throwaway line right at the beginning about, "Oh, my granddaughter made me slide down the banister and I turned my heel," or something. Not true. The actor Lionel Barrymore couldn't walk without them, so they wrote it in. And he's great, but the film isn't. I mean, like you said, it's no bomb. There's nothing wrong with it.
No,
it's just frivolous and inconsequential, and just reminds you of other better things to come from pretty much everybody involved.
If this is the kind of theme that you want to see on the big screen, watch The Birdcage. Birdcage is one of my favorite films. Tammy and I love it. We did a big community night here where we all dressed in drag and went there. I'll have to dig out that picture for this.
Please do. Please do. I want to see that appearing right now.
I can pull it on my phone. I got it on my phone. I'll show you afterwards.
Oh, lucky me.
There's certain images you just can't unsee.
Well, that's what I'm worried about. Right. On that note, yes, I hope you let us know how you feel about You Can't Take It With You. Are we wrong? Is this like one of the greats of Frank Capra's career? Is this, justified in being the movie that launched Jimmy Stewart's leading man status? Let us know what you think. If you have a particular relationship or particular reaction to this movie, we would love to hear about it.
I couldn't agree more. Hey, and if you want to know more from James and I, you can follow us on social media. We're both on Twitter and on Instagram. You find those links in the description box below. Until next week, James.
Yep. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.